Welcome back into the Whistle. I'm Jackson, and this is my finals pre-show, prediction show, anything of the sort show. I'm very excited for this one. The Boston Celtics are facing off against the Dallas Mavericks. I just did Game 5 reaction to that, and then I wanted to sit on this and hear what the professionals are saying about this series, see what the players are saying about their preparation, how they feel going into it, and ultimately kind of sit back and really sit on my pick to not only get it right, but be not caught by the hype of being as a finals, as being a Mavs fan, which will not play a role in my pick because I'm going to save that to the end. But I think I have a pretty interesting and unique pick to this whole situation. But yes, the Boston Celtics and the Dallas Mavericks are facing off in the NBA Finals of the year 2024. Luka's first finals, Tatum's redemption, great storylines. Kyrie's return to Boston. Does Jaylen Brown become the finals MVP? Is it Tatum or Brown that wins that award? What is the impact of this on both Luka and Tatum's? We're going to get into that in today's episode. I'm super excited. But first, we're going to look at the previous matchups, kind of get a full story of these two teams and how they match up against each other. Now, the first matchup between these teams, because they only played twice this season, came earlier, I think, in January. And this was before the Mavericks made their, I would say, blockbuster trades, not necessarily at the time, but now you can't tell a story without the Mavericks, without the trades of Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington. But they faced off, and the Celtics got the 119 to 110 victory. Luka Doncic dropped a triple-double, 33-point triple-double, 13 points, 18 rebounds, and 13 assists. That's just absolutely insane. But Tatum went off for 39 points, 11 rebounds, and 5 assists with a team high plus 27, which is just insane. This dude balled out. And you don't necessarily want to consider this first game in the whole metrics of the whole thing, but I think there is merit to it in this one point. Both Tatum and Luka went off, and Jaylen Brown also went off with 34 points, but he was also -6, which if you're a plus-minus guy, that could matter. I don't think it matters too much in terms of single games over a series. Yes, over a certain lot of games, yes, plus-minus does matter, but I don't think in this case it necessarily matters. +6 when you win by, or -6 when you win by 9, not the end of the world. But as we transition to, I guess, more of the telling game, which was after the trade deadline, the Celtics absolutely politely ass-kicked the Dallas Mavericks in this series, or in this game, 138 to 110. Oh, well, they scored the same amount of points in both games. Luka had, he had 37, 12, and 11, so another triple-double, but was also -20 in this game. Meanwhile, Jason Tatum had 32 points. He was +17 with 8 rebounds and 3 assists. And this game featured Kristaps Porzingis for the first time going up against the Mavericks as a Celtic. He was, I think, really the X factor in this one with 4 big threes throughout the game. Was +14 with 24 final points. He was able to stretch out the court for the Celtics, and I expect him to do more of the same in this series. And as we look at what are some other teams, Kyrie's return to Boston wasn't his best showing with 19 points, 9 of 23, 1 of 7 from 3, only 2 assists with 4 rebounds, -15. Not a good game from Kyrie. And obviously, Daniel Gafford only played 6 minutes in this game. 6 minutes in this game, which is absolutely preposterous, just to say the least. Because that was weird, because Jason Kidd was dealing with, do I start Lively or Gafford? Gafford wasn't really playing well in that stretch of games for the Celtics. So it is interesting to note that as I'm trying to pull up the season log for the Mavericks, because I think that was in a bad rut for the Mavericks. Now look, the Celtics deserve that win. I'm not making any excuses for the Mavericks, but I do think there is a reason why the Mavs got mollywopped in that game and why they stand a better chance against the Celtics in this game. One reason is Daniel Gafford is getting more minutes. Now, am I saying Daniel Gafford is better than Derek Lively? That's a debate for the offseason and really could be, a huge deciding factor in this series of which big is better. We saw throughout the postseason, Derek Lively had a much better plus minus stat. He's like plus 100 on the season. He was in the clutch lineup for the Mavs throughout all of their series, and we saw them lose the game against the Minnesota Timberwolves when he was out. So he clearly has a positive impact on the team. That's not news to anybody, but it is important to see what comparing, contrasting him versus Gafford. Now, as we look at their season as a whole, when they played Boston that second time, this was when they were in that really rough spot because they had this post-trade. They had a huge winning streak. That was like, 7 games at that point? And then they go and they play at Indiana. And they just could not get a stop. They get mollywopped by 22 points. Then they go to Cleveland and lose on an absolute heartbreaker, Max Strus full court bomb to basically beat them after it was a really great game. PJ Washington had off the assist, had the dunk to give them a 1-point lead, and then Max Strus obviously takes the heart out of all Mavs fans. And then you go to Toronto, get redemption after losing to them earlier in the season, but it's Toronto, not necessarily a major opponent. Then you go to Boston, and you get absolutely mollywopped. And this is where a 3-game skid for the Mavs happened. Then they go and play 2 days later at home against Philadelphia without Joel Embiid. Luka drops 38, and you still lose 137 to 120. Their defense was not good at all in this stretch. And then you go and play Indiana again at home, and you lose again by 17 points. And they really weren't able to play well. They were not playing well defensively. Their offense was fine. Luka was really carrying them at this point, and Luka had 45 in that Cavs game, and they lost. And so it proves that Luka is great, but he can't be your driving force offensively in terms of point scoring. He can't drop 50 points and you win when your defense is playing that poorly. So what am I getting at here? Well, then they were able to rally off a win against Miami, Detroit, Chicago, Golden State. Not necessarily super impactful teams. They lost a close game against OKC without Luka, but then they beat Denver, which was the turning point in their season. So what am I saying? It's not the same Dallas team as it was back then. Now you could say the same thing as for the Celtics. The Celtics have 12 wins under the belt this postseason, only 2 losses, a 12-2 record. Tip of their cap, their road may be easier, but it was a very efficient run by them, and they were able to handle business in the clutch. We didn't really see them get, tensed up or lose in the clutch. They were able to handle business, and you got to tip their cap because these other teams may have crumbled in the moment, but the Celtics were able to counter that. The only games they lost was Miami made like 20-something threes, and then the Cavs did the same thing. And so, yeah, they may have had an easy road, but their games were certainly not, people say, were they tested? I would say if all of them were blowouts, then no, they weren't tested, but they had a deal in the clutch, and they were able to make clutch plays. Now, against superstar teams, superstar defenders, no. And do the Mavericks necessarily have that? I wouldn't say superstar defenders, but much better clutch lineups, and especially when the opposing offense has a guy in Luka and Kyrie, which are bona fide closers that could play a role in this game. But let's transition now into what a series win here, an NBA championship, would mean to the players on these rosters. Let's start with the Celtics. Well, Jason Tatum then becomes bona fide in that top 3 discussion, I think, just because of his championship. I think he finally gets declared a winner. People will start seeing him as a winner. And even though he's not necessarily has the intangibles or, the physical traits of a Jokic in his passing and his shooting, or a Luka in the same things, or even a Giannis in his offense and defensive dominance that he has, Tatum will now be bona fide as the best winner in the NBA right now. Obviously excluding LeBron, but LeBron losing the first round and recency bias, he becomes the best winner in the NBA, and that's without discussion. There's no way to say he is not the best winner. The only thing that could trip him up is not winning Finals MVP. We saw Tatum win that in the Eastern Conference Finals, but no one's necessarily batting an eye and knocking that against Tatum. That just proves how good of a teammate and how good of a player Jaylen Brown is. Speaking of Jaylen Brown, what does this mean for him? Well, same discussion as Jason Tatum. If he wins Finals MVP, that completely changed the dynamic of this team in terms of narratives. Does Brown become the best player on this team in terms of people talking about him? Does he become the guy that, people talk about Luka for the Mavs as that A1 guy? And does Jason Tatum fall to 1B? If Jaylen Brown has a great series and Tatum has a bad series and the Celtics win, I think those discussions are seriously going to happen this summer. And I'm actually would be interested to see if the Celtics win, what those discussions would look like. Let's transition to Drew Holiday, which would become a 2-time champ on 2 different teams. And this guy would just also be, he would be looked as the perfect role player. And I know he's an all-star, and I know he's all-star caliber, all defensive caliber, and he's a great player, but I think he is more of a glorified role player. He's not necessarily going to lift you offensively. He can knock down a couple threes, get you some big buckets in the clutch, but he's known for his defense, and I think that's what he's going to be known for if the Celtics win, but also start a little bit of a run here because they re-signed him to a 4-year contract, and they're paying him a lot of money. They extended this team massively. Another player that got a huge extension, or at least an extension, was Kristaps Porzingis. He's going to return for the NBA Finals. As a Mavs fan, I would want to have it no other way because if you're going to beat a team, you want to beat them at their best potential. So what does this mean for Kristaps? Well, he becomes one of those guys that has a ring. He doesn't necessarily improve in narrative speak, but because he's not a number 1 option, not even a number 2, and depending on how the series go, he might not even be the number 4 option or number 3 option. He might be the number 4. Is that a knock against him? No. I think he is going to be, like I said, if the Celtics can go on a little bit of a run here winning championships, because I think they have that good of a team to do so, especially future-wise, then he becomes more, could he potentially be a Hall of Famer? And this is the stepping stone to becoming that because of his unique stature, him being a unicorn, 7'3", be able to knock down the three-pointer. It would be one of the most unique players in NBA history to win a championship. And then finally, the last person I would want to mention would be Derek White. He would also kind of be in that same situation as a Drew Holiday, just without this first championship. If they go on a little bit of a run, he becomes known for his role-playing capabilities. He's, I don't want to say glorified role player because that's kind of sounds, negative, but you need that on a championship team. And we've seen this in years past. If role players stepping up and making huge plays in the NBA Finals, he could absolutely do that. And then you have a guy like Al Horford who wins his first championship. Does he get potential Hall of Fame knocks? I don't think so. I think that's a little bit extreme, but he finally gets that ring. He can retire if he wants to. He's 39. He's up there in age. That would be a nice little send-off. Now let's transition to the Dallas side. Obviously, huge implications for the Celtics, but what does this mean for the Mavericks? Well, for Luka Doncic, it states one of the best start to a career ever. You're like, what do you mean Tatum's has a better winning resume? But in terms of like raw individual stats, 5-time All NBA, first team All NBA, I should say, top 3 in MVP voting for numerous years, number 1 player on a championship team, has a championship and MVP, Finals MVP, and a Western Conference MVP, all by the age of 25. If Dallas can keep this squad going, maybe upgrade a little bit with their bench, re-sign Derrick Jones Jr., they could start a run. And this could be really I don't want to say legacy-defining game, but Jordan was 6-0 in finals. If Luka loses here, I think he has more to lose rather than more to gain, because now it comes the narrative of if he's not able to come back. Well, he hit that one finals and then he blew it against the Celtics if he plays bad. I don't think he will, but there is that narrative that could come out. Now we go to Kyrie, who has, I think, the most to gain in terms of a whole career narrative, because this could be not the final chapter, but I think a good close to his story in terms of his redemption, even though he didn't necessarily need to redeem himself. I think a championship here would be a great addition to the story of Kyrie Irving. Obviously, first overall pick, only played like 9 games at Duke, first overall pick, won a championship, hit one of the clutchest shots in NBA history, and then, kind of goes on a tailspin, goes to Boston, in which he defeats later on, which would be just cinema, because that's kind of the start of his downfall. Goes to Brooklyn, train wreck there, gets traded to Dallas. Everyone's like calling this a horrible trade. ESPN gives their like D- or D grade for the trade, and then a year later they win the championship. And if he could drop 27 points a game, have really true productive games this series, and helps them win rather than be kind of a role player in that what we kind of saw in that OKC series, that would be huge for the narrative and the career of Kyrie Irving. And also would be a slap in the face to all of the Team USA people for not having him on that team. Speaking of USA, I don't know why I said speaking of USA, going to Derek Lively, which I think is the third Mav to gain the most out of this team. A rookie center playing impactful minutes to win a championship in his first year after being all-team second NBA. Now, I might be digging at, straws here or picking at straws here, but I think he has huge potential to have a Hall of Fame career, or at least a notable career in the NBA by winning a championship. He will probably be the starter here maybe next season or the season after that, because I think he is a slightly better in his fit with Luka than Gafford is. Gafford may be better defensively, but offensively Lively is better, which people look at the box score, they see points, they're like, okay, they see plus minus, they're like, okay. And if he wins, he would have a great start to his young NBA career. PJ Washington and Derek Jones Jr. kind of have similar stories, not necessarily huge narrative changes for them. They're known as champions now. Great role players, great 3-and-D guys. Derek Jones Jr., great career story for him, bouncing around all the place, not able to find his footing anywhere. For him to win a championship and get a big extension would be great for him. Same thing with PJ Washington, even though he's not up for an extension. Still a 3-and-D guy, same thing with Gafford. And that's really it for the Mavs. It's really just Kyrie and Luka and maybe Lively that have the bigger ones. A lot is on stake for the Boston Celtics. So when you compare these two teams as we go to the comparison side and you compare the guards, you got to give it to Luka and Kyrie. If you want to say Jaylen Brown's a 2, who's better, Jaylen Brown or Kyrie Irving, I think you would have to give the tip of the nod to a Jaylen Brown, because I think he could do more on the defensive side. I'm not saying Kyrie's a bad defender. I think he's been excellent on the defensive side in this postseason, but I think Jaylen Brown might have a little bit more of an effect for the Mavs to win. Kyrie obviously would have to have more, but going into this series, I think Jaylen Brown has more an effect because he's the debatable number 1 on this team, which Kyrie, as great as he is not the number 1. It's clearly Luka, and that's not a knock on Kyrie. It's just how good Luka Doncic is. But then you go down the wings, and it's Tatum. For this one, I'll give it to, I want to say Kyrie and Luka, because I want to give it Kyrie, Luka, and then Jason, Tatum, and Jaylen Brown. And then it goes down to the center position, Gafford or Porzingis. In terms of the matchup, I think I'd rather have Gafford rather than Porzingis due to health and other stuff like that. But that's outside of basketball. I think Porzingis will be the better player this series because being able to stretch Gafford out of the paint, make his impact felt less would be huge in terms of the Celtics' ability to attack the paint, which I think we'll see a huge exploitation of the Mavs defense that way by bringing Gafford out. Now, can the Mavs make defensive switches in terms of maybe bringing Kleba in and switching everything, or maybe putting PJ on Porzingis and Lively on someone else? Who knows? We'll have to see. But then once we get to the bench, I've got Derek White, but I think the Celtics overall have the better team. I don't think you can necessarily compare stars in this one. I think you got Luka, Tatum, Brown, Kyrie, Porzingis, and then like Derek White, Drew, and then a lot of Mavs, and then maybe why am I keep forgetting Al Horford, the legend himself? But no, so I'm very excited to see this. So now we're going down to our picks as we're nearing 19 minutes on this to make it just quick and snappy, a quick little listen as you're driving to the grocery store. This is either going to be a quick series or a long series. And you're like, obviously, no crap, Jackson. Obviously, it's going to go one of two ways. No, I think this is either a 4 or 5 game series. And you're saying 5's medium. I would say it's still short, a gentleman's sweep, or it goes 7. And it's like, 7? You're really picking 7? And I think either the Celtics win in 5 or 4, because I think they can exploit the Mavs defense, like I said, in our open, or the Mavericks offense or defense will prove to give Celtics some trouble, and they're able to extend this to 7 games, and they would ultimately win that 7th game in Boston. If it comes down to a must-win game, I think I'm going to give it to Luka Doncic. He has proven to step up in those cases. Not saying Tatum's going to, flounder, but I think when the getting gets tough, I think Luka's going to step up. I think Kyrie's going to step up. And I don't know if necessarily the other Celtics are necessarily going to live up to the hype of a Game 7 that this series would have. So what is my official pick? I could see a path where it's more likely where the Mavs win in 6 rather than 7 because winning in Boston is much harder. But that kind of just throws away what I just said. So I'm going to pick the Mavs in 7 here. If you go back to my YouTube page and where I picked the entire playoffs, I had this exact finals matchup. And I think I picked the Mavs in 7 in this one. I think it goes either Mavs in 7 or Celtics in 5. I think Mavs will get at least one in this series if they're clearly outmatched. I don't think we'll find out in Game 1. I think Game 1 is actually going to go Boston's way. I think Boston now it all relies on Kristaps Porzingis. If he has a good game, Boston, I think, will blow out Dallas. I think Dallas will have to make a couple adjustments. They're always bad in Game 1. They did win against Minnesota, but I think that was just a complete mismatch in both teams. But this one is a mismatch the other way around, where Dallas will have to play superior basketball to what they've been playing at this point, where the Celtics have to play at least a quality basketball to win. So what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below on YouTube. Make sure to follow All Jacked Up Sports. I'm super excited. I'm going to be posting some, YouTube shorts, some TikTok, some Instagram reels here, just to summarize my points, to get the word about the whistle. I'm super excited for the series. I'm recording this on Tuesday, so we're a couple days out still. I can't wait. I keep seeing posts. Hopefully it's a good series. Hopefully it's not, like I said, Celtics in 5 or 4. I think that would just be a robbery of for NBA fans, because this is one of the best narrative NBA finals we've ever had. Yeah, I can say that. And especially recently, this is probably the best finals narrative since Golden State with KD playing the first time against LeBron James. That one was like, do they get revenge? Or even the 73 Warriors against LeBron. I know that one necessarily, it's kind of another rematch, but this one's unique. This could be another, Celtics Lakers mid-80s type of run, because you have two superstars. I do think Jason Tatum is a superstar, and even if he's not, they have two quality, strongly, persistent stars in Brown and Tatum. And then you have a guy like Luka who's going to play for at least, top tier, first All-NBA quality basketball for the next 5 years, at least, I would say. So I'm excited. Here's to good basketball. Thank you guys for listening. I'll see you guys in the next one.